Every day, you make choices that feel like your own. What to seek, what to believe, how to live. Those choices feel deeply personal because they seem to come from within you. But what if that feeling is not as simple as it appears? Before you chose anything, you were already shaped by forces you did not choose. You did not choose many of the elements that formed you. Your genes, your family environment, your culture, or the conditions that shaped your early understanding of the world. From childhood, we learn to understand the world through the environment we are given, and we begin to make choices within those limits. Even as adults, our choices may not be as free as they feel. If your desires and fears were shaped before you understood them, and if your attention is guided by systems designed to influence behavior, how much of your life was truly chosen by you? In this episode, we examine one of the most unsettling questions in human existence: free will. If free will is an illusion, what is actually shaping our choices? A choice may begin in the brain before we consciously feel that we have made it. Conscious decision-making may only be one part of a longer process. Researchers have tried to examine this question by studying the relationship between consciousness and action. One of the most famous examples was published in 1983 by Benjamin Libet and his colleagues in the journal Brain. Participants were asked to perform a simple voluntary movement, such as flexing a wrist or moving a finger, while researchers measured electrical activity in the brain. The study reported that a pattern of brain activity known as the readiness potential appeared before participants became consciously aware of their intention to move. In 2008, a study by Chun-Xiong Soon and his colleagues was published in Nature Neuroscience. In this experiment, 12 healthy adult participants were asked to press either a left or right button whenever they chose, while their brain activity was measured using fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging. The researchers reported that patterns of activity in parts of the prefrontal and parietal cortex could predict, better than chance, which button a participant would choose several seconds before the participant became consciously aware of that choice. Neither finding was simple, and the interpretation remains debated. Still, both studies pointed toward the same possibility. Processes related to choice may already be unfolding in the brain before we consciously feel that we have decided. These findings influenced the study of free will because they raised the possibility that consciousness may not be the starting point of decision-making. If the brain begins preparing movement before conscious intention appears, what is the role of the conscious self? Some researchers argue that the readiness potential does not necessarily represent a hidden decision already made by the brain. In that interpretation, the brain is preparing possibilities, gathering momentum, and moving through probabilities before one action becomes conscious and visible. Even so, conscious choice may not be the beginning of the process. By the time a decision becomes clear enough for us to say, "I chose this," the brain may already have filtered impulses, weighed memories, responded to emotion, and prepared the body to act. We believe we have chosen our own lives, but behind those choices, memory, habit, emotion, and environment may have been shaping those choices for years. If a decision begins before our conscious awareness, The next question is what the self that makes that decision really is. We often speak about choice as if a stable self stands behind every action, calmly looking at the world and deciding what to do. But the self develops over time. It is not a fixed object hidden somewhere inside us. A child learns how to see the world through family, culture, and the reactions of adults. And that learning becomes the foundation for later choices. A person raised in stability may come to feel that the future can be planned. A person raised in instability may learn that the future must be survived. Both begin as adaptation. Over time, the strategies someone developed to endure the world can begin to feel like the person themselves. Freedom always begins from your own history, and that history partly decides which choices feel natural, which choices feel dangerous, and which choices never appear as choices at all. Two people can stand before the same opportunity and see completely different things. That is why free will is difficult to separate from inequality. A person with protection and education does not begin from the same conditions as someone raised in fear or scarcity. Both may go through the step of making a decision, but in reality, they are deciding within entirely different worlds. Culture works the same way. Society can teach a person what success is and what kind of life has value before that person has learned to think for themselves. By the time those values feel personal, they may already have entered the self so deeply that inheritance feels like desire. We say, "This is what I want." But sometimes what we want may be what the world has trained us to want. How much of our choice is the voice of the past speaking so fluently that we mistake it for ourselves? If the self is shaped by the past, modern life adds another layer to the question of freedom. Today, we are also influenced by systems designed to affect what we want. Every day, we live inside environments where screens, algorithms, advertising, and social media learn what captures our attention, triggers our anxiety, and shapes our desire, then use that knowledge to influence us. Over time, these systems begin to rearrange the world we believe we are freely choosing from. Often, it is enough to repeat the same image, place it beside reward, and surround it with approval. Eventually, it begins to feel like a personal dream. Even values and romantic preferences can feel entirely personal, yet they may be shaped through years of media and social influence, through quiet training in what is considered attractive, successful, and valuable. What if the choice was not forced, but prepared? The more personalized technology becomes, the less visible this process is. In the past, propaganda had to speak loudly. It appeared on walls, in newspapers, on radio, or through the voice of political power. Today, influence can arrive more quietly, more individually, and almost invisibly. The system only needs to suggest often enough, and suggestion, repeated over time, can begin to feel like preference. More than 2/3 of the world's population is now represented in monthly social media use. Among internet users aged 16 and above, almost everyone uses at least one social platform every month. Online adults spend more than 1 hour a day on social networks alone. And if video-based platforms such as YouTube and TikTok are included, average daily use rises to more than 2.5 hours. Culture has always shaped beauty, status, love, morality, and aspiration. But the scale has changed. Today's influence is faster, more personalized, more measurable. and more profitable than at any earlier point in human history. A platform does not need to understand the meaning of your life. It only needs to observe and understand your patterns of behavior, and when influence accumulates. Your choices may still feel free, even if the landscape around them has been quietly designed. A person may wake up one morning dissatisfied with their own circumstances, without noticing how much of that dissatisfaction was assembled outside them. The feeling is real. That is why it is so effective. And once desire can be shaped at scale, responsibility can no longer remain a question of the individual alone. If your choice has already been shaped before it appears in consciousness as a decision, what happens after that decision is made? We often judge a choice only by its result, but the desires, expectations, and anxieties that led to that choice may also have been shaped over a long period of time. That is why another person's bad choice can look almost impossible to understand from the outside. Why do people make dangerous choices that seem incomprehensible to others from a distance? The answer looks simple. They should have known better. But from inside the decision, the world may look entirely different. When people make harmful choices, they do not always experience them as harmful in that moment. Often, the choice appears as a way to gain hope or relief. This is the distance we often fail to see. The observer sees the risk. The person inside the choice sees the need. A secure person may delete a suspicious message without emotion, ignore a beauty standard without pain, or walk away from a promise that sounds too perfect. But for someone who is vulnerable, the same message or image can reach a place that logic alone cannot easily control. Victims are not always deceived because they are foolish. In many cases, loneliness, anxiety, hope, or other psychological vulnerabilities are being targeted, and in the modern world, that false opportunity can be made to look endlessly convincing. Even when a choice has been shaped by pressure, the consequences are real. Money and trust can be lost, and sometimes a life can be pulled into deep regret or exploitation. A person still has to face the results of their own choices, yet the values and feelings that made those choices seem necessary are also shaped by the world around them. And if that is true, can the society or environment that creates those pressures really be innocent? Even when no one is intentionally manipulating another person, systems built around profit and efficiency can create pressure that pushes people towards specific choices. The people inside those systems may not even realize that this is happening. That is why, when we think about free will, we must question how the very feeling of freedom is produced. What kind of freedom are we actually talking about? If free will is not as pure as we imagined, freedom may begin to look smaller than we hoped. The life you call your own may be a chain of causes that reached you before you had the power to refuse them. The person you are is built on conditions you did not choose. But perhaps freedom begins when we can see how we have been shaped. A person cannot choose every desire that appears inside them, but they can ask whether that desire still deserves to be followed. And even inside systems designed to capture attention, a person may learn to pause before treating every impulse as truth. That is the moment when the past speaks, and you finally ask who gave it the right to command. in the modern environment. That is not easy. But we can still try to understand what is influencing us and choose with awareness instead of obeying unconsciously. Because we want to believe our will still belongs to us.